Good evening, everybody, and welcome to FASD Hub Scotland Wednesday webinar. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. I'm delighted to welcome Jessica Sinarski as our guest for this evening. I have to say, just like a little bit of a personal aside for me. So as an adoptive parent of a young person with FASD, who was only diagnosed in 2020, despite a sort of 8-year fight, I probably, like many people, were searching, looking, listening, reading, and first heard about Jessica on the Jeff Noble podcast, and then subsequently looked at some of her books and her series, Riley's a Brave, Your Amazing Brain book, and then her website with Brave Brains. And I would definitely recommend, after this evening's webinar, that you go and check out Jessica Sinarski, Brave Brains. Go onto Amazon. We can post some links in the chat throughout the evening, and, you know, access those books, because my daughter's 13, but they have really been beneficial in my life, just to find my own language, to reiterate to her who she is and what she is, and, you know, all the great talents and brilliance that she has. So I just found, particularly for me, Jessica was just a great person that came into my life remotely at a time when I needed it. And so I was very keen, when tasked with finding the guests for our Wednesday webinars, to reach out to her. And thankfully, she joined us this evening. So Jessica offers like really, really deeply trauma-informed support and education for home and for school, and for the community, really. And I've spoken to Jessica outside of this evening and talked to her about how she became involved with FASD, and I'm sure she'll probably share that with you if it's relevant throughout the evening. But she's here tonight to provide you with education, inspiration, advice, and hopefully we'll have time for a Q&A at the end of this evening. This evening we have our FASD lead, Barbara Ogston, with us, who will be monitoring the chat alongside me for the evening. Please feel free to type any questions at all that you have in the chat. We can monitor that. Don't worry about posting questions at any time, because we're going to hand over to Jessica. She's going to do her presentation, but we will monitor and we can always go back. So don't worry, just put them in the chat all the way through, and then we can go back at the end. But that allows Jessica to do the presentation and make the most of the hour that we have with her. So I'm mindful of the fact that we only have an hour and we're already 4 minutes in. So I'm going to hand over to Jessica. Thank you so much for joining us, Jessica. And let's listen to you.
Well, thank you, Jo, for that lovely introduction. It's good to be with you. I am over on the East Coast of the United States, and happy to be joining you remotely. I would love to join you in person, but we are all enjoying the benefits of this sort of hybrid, you know, ability to connect across time and space. So that is lovely. I want us to jump right in to make the most of the time. I'll just share a little bit about my background and how I came to be here on your computer screen or your device this evening. So my background is in mental health. I've spent almost 20 years now in the world, specifically largely dealing with developmental trauma, and that includes prenatal trauma. So I'm not sure I certainly didn't realize right out of graduate school the extent to which prenatal trauma impacted lifelong, all kinds of things. So we're going to talk a little bit today about big feelings, big behavior, some of those things that get so tricky to navigate with our kids with FASD. I won't take any more time than that. I hope we have a chance to connect more in the future. I'll share some ways that we can stay connected. But for tonight, I really want to just give your brain, your heart, a big hug and a lot of support around a topic that I think will resonate with all of us as parents in general and caregivers, but certainly when we're dealing with fetal alcohol exposure. So, as Joe said, please jot any notes in any questions into the chat. There will actually be a part a little bit later where we're going to be able to interact a little bit in the chat. One of the things I miss the most when I'm doing something that's more webinar style is just being able to see your faces and connect a little bit with some of those nonverbals. So, the chat will give us a little bit of an opportunity for that. Okay, in fact, we're going to jump in right away with connecting in the chat a little bit, because my first question that I want us to think about is, where does big behavior come from? So we're talking about big feelings. We know that big feelings often lead to big behavior. If someone were to ask you, where does big behavior come from? What do you think? And no wrong answers, just throw it out there and we'll get the conversation going. Anxiety, fear, school. Yes, we certainly see big behaviors coming up with school. Low self-esteem. These are great answers. And I love that you're thinking about what's behind it, right? So a need to get themselves understood, a need for help, right? There's an ask in the behavior, even when it doesn't feel like they're asking for the thing that they're actually asking for. Communication, fear, frustration, and unmet need. So often, even for ourselves, right? When our behavior is not what we wish it were, there's always something behind that, a need for control. We want to understand what's going on in our world, in our environment, in our day-to-day. Great explanations here. So I'm going to share with you something that in 4 years of college for psychology and 2 years of graduate school for counseling psychology, and probably lots of professional development since then, a phrase that I first heard from a researcher just a couple of years ago that I just informs everything that I do. And that is that all behavior comes from the brain. So just like the heart, like your cardiac tissue is responsible for pumping blood through your body, your brain and body, right? Your brain is responsible for sending every single electrical and chemical impulse for everything you think and feel and say and do. All behavior comes from the brain. And this is part of why I am so passionate about helping to get brain science out into the world in a visual, user-friendly, and compassionate way. So I think I am guessing many of you have experienced working with professionals or even dealing with family members who struggle to see the brain state behind the behavior, who struggle to understand that your child's brain has been impacted by what they experienced in utero, and that impacts their behavior today. And that's a hard link for a lot of people to hold. So I want to help us not just hold that connection, but also provide some language and then some strategies for really keeping all of that in mind as we put this together. So as a starting place, we're not going to go way into brain development. That would take much more time than we have this evening. But I do want to share this little tidbit, and that is that brain development is all about connections. And I mean that in two ways. So brain development is, we're talking about when we think about a brain developing across the lifespan, across early childhood and into young adulthood. What we mean by the brain developing is that it is forming useful connections within. From neuron to neuron, there are connections happening inside the brain and therefore out into the body as well to make things happen. Additionally, brain development is reliant upon our connection to each other. So a little brain like this little squishy baby that I want to just squeeze their little cheeks and hug them and love them, that little one needs what I call in the Riley the Brave series, a safe big critter. In fact, all of us need safe big critters, even into adulthood, but certainly our little ones need a safe adult to depend on. They cannot survive without that safe grown-up. So brain development is all about connections. And here's why that matters. Because where the connections are forming really impacts behavior. So I want to share with you something that may be familiar. It's this house model of the brain. Your brain has stairs. That was developed by Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson in their book, The Whole Brain Child. If you haven't checked that out, it's a great primer on just general brain development. It's not trauma specific by any stretch, but it really helps hold what the heck is going on in the brain. And this understanding that the brain has two main operating systems, that the brain has an upstairs and a downstairs, that has been just transformational, both in my professional world and as I'm raising my kids. So I have 3 boys who are now in age 9. We've got birthdays coming up, 9, 12, and 14. And there's some neurodivergence in my home. And really understanding that the upstairs and downstairs brain are impactful in how we function. Well, let me back up. Let me tell you why this is so powerful. So the downstairs brain is responsible for basic functions, like here you see breathing, blinking, your heartbeat, those act without thinking kinds of actions. That's coming from the downstairs brain, along with those automatic reactions like fight and flight, or strong emotions like anger or fear. You might have heard it called like the reptilian brain, lizard brain, survival brain. This is the part of the brain that really prioritizes self-protection and survival, right? So it involves, for those of you who are want a little bit more of the nerdy part of it, the downstairs brain includes the brain stem and the limbic system, that emotional and memory center of the brain. It also includes the amygdala that we'll talk about in just a minute. Our upstairs brain is more evolved. Our upstairs brain lets us be curious. It lets us connect with others. It includes, again, for the nerdy folks among us, it includes not only that prefrontal cortex, but also just the whole exterior part of the brain that lets us think and plan and imagine and be curious and problem solve and wait our turn and all kinds of things that our kids tend to struggle with, right? That kids with FASD tend to struggle with. It's the home of executive function, so the planning and time management sort of functions. It's also the home of playfulness. It gives us a fuller perspective on our world instead of sort of getting stuck and rigid. That flexible thinking is an upstairs brain function. And we really need its help. We need that upstairs brain's help to manage the big feelings that come up from the downstairs brain. But FASD impacts this staircase of the brain. FASD makes it harder to access some of those upstairs brain functions. Survival mode becomes bigger and louder, and upstairs brain functions take a lot more practice, and they may just remain a little bit harder than they are for neurotypical children. So as Joe mentioned, I'll share some resources along the way. Not only does the Whole Brain Child dive into this a lot actually, but Riley the Brave's Big Feelings activity book helps to put this language, this understanding in kid-friendly terms, to help bring this understanding to not only to you to help hold it, but also to your kids. It's geared toward ages 5 to 10, but we know that our kids with FASD have varying ages inside them. So there's that chronological age, but there's also all kinds of other ages as well, wrapped up inside the same person. I love making things visual, so I just want to flesh this out a little bit more because the reality is only one of these operating systems can be in charge at any given time. So it's either our upstairs brain that's sort of guiding us, even if that means managing some of the big feelings coming up from the downstairs brain. So it doesn't mean you'll never feel angry, or you'll never, sort of want to tuck into your turtle shell and shut down. Navigating that is part of that staircase working well, that staircase of the mind working well. It's part of those connections that are forming inside the brain. But what happens with FASD is that we start to, like I said, it impacts a couple things. So one is this little character is our amygdala. So the amygdala is this almond-shaped bundle of neurons, this little part of the brain that sort of acts as the traffic director, as the here you see it represented sort of as the little general of the army that's calling the downstairs brain into action. It is ready to send in our tiger protectors or our porcupine protectors, or it's saying shut it all down, just collapse into turtle mode and shut everything out. And for our kiddos, those downstairs brain powers are going to be stronger because their brains have biased development of those protective survival mechanisms more than having the luxury of this slow path to the upstairs brain. And so as we see in behavior, we see a lot more of this fast and furious, impulsive, or rigid or inflexible, right? All of these kinds of downstairs brain behaviors, or frozen, shut down, shut you out. Some of those, like I hate you, don't leave me, confusing sorts of behaviors. So here's where an understanding of the brain, especially a compassionate understanding of the brain, can really help us make sense of, well, it does a number of things. So one, it can help us keep our upstairs brain in charge, even when we see downstairs brain behavior from our kiddos. So let's flesh this out a little bit more. Because here's the reality. We all have downstairs brain moments. So I want you to think about your kids as we look through these specific downstairs brain moments that are part of that are what I end up talking about a lot in my work. So think about your kids and maybe even jot in the chat, or, if you're watching with someone, chat with each other about what's coming up for you as you think about these downstairs brain protectors, and maybe which one tends to be loudest in your home, or even, what questions you have as you're thinking through this. So first up, we're starting with that that more protective, prickly response. So I'm having a porcupine moment when I'm grumpy, when I'm prickly toward others, when I'm stuck in my negative thoughts. That's that porcupine kind of behavior. I will confess, I was having lots of porcupine moments last week. I was short on sleep. There were too many demands around me. I'm in the middle of releasing a book and just finishing up with this other book, and lots of talks and lots of annoying business things, and not enough of the fun stuff like connecting with people. And my porcupine brain was loud. And even being able to say, my porcupine brain is loud, was helpful for me to not then snap at my kids or take it out on my husband, or even just to give myself a little bit of permission to care for myself. So I probably shouldn't have shared that part now, because we're going to talk a little bit more about how this impacts us, but it's just so on my mind because it was such a big part of how I was feeling last week. For my kids, a lot of times I see porcupine spikes coming out when they haven't had enough to eat, when even what I just said, the demands don't match their skills. And this is something we run into a lot with FASD, where just the everyday demands of life, which seem like they should be able to handle it, those are challenging, and that can bring up grumpy, prickly porcupine kind of behavior. Is that making sense? I'm gonna pull up the chat here just to make sure we're staying connected. Are we feeling the connection here between how this, like what behaviors you might see as we're thinking about some of these downstairs brain moments? All right, cool. So let's keep going here with our downstairs brain moments. I'm having a squirrel moment when I don't want to share, when I take other people's things, or when I want everything for myself. So we know that impulse control is often a challenge with FASD, and in a lot of ways that's coming from that downstairs brain, where I don't have the connection to my think before acting upstairs brain, where I don't have connection to that powerful part of my brain that lets me slow down, not take my sister's stuff, or not, squirrel things away. This is something I see a lot with kids with trauma histories in general, and certainly with FASD, where we're slowing down enough to not take stuff from a store or just control those impulses is really challenging. And it's not because they want to be a bad kid that they are having a downstairs brain moment. Does that mean it's okay? No. Does it mean that we just excuse the behavior and they're allowed to just take what they want? No, they need our guidance. And if we can talk about this in terms of, this is part of the magic of having it in animal form, is if we can talk about, hey, your squirrel brain got really loud, or gosh, we're going into the store now, and I know when we see that candy, your squirrel brain says, I don't want all the candy. Let's see if we can put our hands in our pockets, or gosh, can we use a fidget or a squishy, or let's pop a piece of gum in our mouth so that we have something to do while instead of letting that squirrel brain take the things that we're supposed to take. And I love this comment in the chat. Us adults too, we can model it when we are having those moments. And let's be honest, we all have squirrel moments too. Times when we feel jealous of others and want what they have, or times that we want to, we want all the resources for ourselves. And it doesn't make you a bad person. It's just part of the downstairs brain is part of us, and it prioritizes survival. It's just not very good at thinking things through. It's not very good at teamwork. It's not very good at a number of other things. And so we can see that these parts of the brain aren't bad. They just need a little compassion and support to not take over so much. Okay, so let's look here at tiger moments. So tiger moments are our big, when you think about fight, that fight response, or hurting people, damaging things, acting big and scary when we're using loud, mean words. For grown-ups, it might be when we're getting into that intimidating posture, or a clue that my tiger brain is taking over is that I want power and control in a situation. And, I don't really care what kids are learning. I just want them to do what I want them to do, right? So, okay, I need to take a breath and make sure I have control of my tiger brain. When I just want to punish a behavior, right? That's telling me, maybe my tiger claws are coming out a little bit. For our kids, this tiger inside takes a lot of time to learn to control, and control might not even be the right word, to learn to manage, to learn to befriend, to find our way through. The other thing that comes up with tiger moments a lot, especially when we're in the world of adoption or foster care or kinship care, is that so many of our kids have had things in life that make sense to be really angry about. And much of the time that has happened before they had words, before they had connections to the upstairs brain that might let them have language for it, that might let them make sense of it in a fuller way, that might let them understand that it's not their fault, or all of these other pieces of the puzzle. And so sometimes we need to make safe space for our kids to have their tiger moments safely, not against me, not against, the other kids, not at school, but where are the spaces that they can rage and roar and work through the really tough stuff that's happened in life. And when we're dealing with FASD, there's another layer there where not only are there maybe traumatic things that happened, after birth and in early childhood, but we also have this injury that happened to their brain when they were in utero, whether mama meant for it to be the case or not, and 99% of the time that no mamas were trying to hurt their babies. Like, that's just typically not the case, right? So it's a lot to hold. All that to say that I find that recognizing that tiger inside serves a purpose can help us hold compassion in tough moments. Okay, 2 more. I'm having a chameleon moment when I try to blend in too much, maybe when I copy others, or I see this one a lot when I can't even stand for people to say nice things about me. So I see this a lot in my work in foster care and adoption, where even complimentary conversations are very dysregulating or very upsetting and confusing for kids who have had some difficult experiences with their primary caregivers. As I have fleshed out this theory, these concepts a little bit more over the last, I don't know, however many years, one of the other things I've noticed is that chameleon comes out by maybe trying to be perfect, trying to do all the things, trying to maybe masking behavior. And so maybe you have a kiddo who's really good at blending in at school and they keep it together at school. And then it feels like you just get, tiger or porcupine galore when that kiddo gets home. It makes sense from a brain perspective. It doesn't necessarily make it easier, but this can help us hold that they're trying to survive in school the best they know how. And but when it's all coming from the downstairs brain, that's exhausting. That's really draining. And last but not least, I'm having a turtle moment when I keep to myself when I won't talk, or I'm having a hard time talking, or when it's hard to let someone help. So asking for help, even you guys showing up tonight, that is an upstairs brain function. Looking for more information, that's an upstairs brain function. So as you look at these downstairs brain moments, which of these tends to be most challenging, or which is a struggle in your home right now? If you want to just type that in the chat, that might just let me kind of think about some of the strategies and things we want to do. So 7 weeks into the new school year, and 2 of my 3 kids are showing porcupine, squirrel, tiger, chameleon, and turtle behaviors every day. Yikes. Tiger moments are big. Tiger, squirrel, and porcupine at home and when out with us. Definitely tiger. Lots of tiger. Lots and lots of tiger. Okay. Thank you for sharing. And again, I just want to give a big heart to heart connection here, because this is hard. I'm seeing in the chat porcupine, tiger, and turtle, a lot of compartmentalizing, so sort of shutting down maybe and shutting others out. And that doesn't feel good. So even with all of these, and I like the comment here that chameleon moments make it really hard to get appropriate help, understanding, and support from school. I think that's part of why I really want to draw attention to that, because all of these are ways of surviving, but they're not, and they're not bad in and of themselves. So figuring out how to use my chameleon powers to get through a rather intolerable school day. Well done, brain, for figuring out how to do that. And let's see if we can help bring some upstairs brain support in to help grow those connections in your brain. And even as you have all shared in the chat, as you're dealing with these downstairs brain moments, I'm wondering if this will start to feel familiar. So we know that trauma changes the brain. That's some of what we're talking about, right? Where we get the downstairs brain gets more well connected, and it's harder to reach that upstairs brain. As I mentioned, the brain controls behavior, but here's the challenge. Our brains as parents and carers naturally respond to children's behavior. And so pretty quickly, trauma, those downstairs brain moments that we're seeing a lot of, can begin to change caregivers' brains, right? It's a brain thing. It makes sense. So if you are struggling to meet those tiger moments with compassion, to meet those porcupine or turtle moments with compassion, that makes sense, because it's entirely possible that your downstairs brain is getting a lot louder too, that your nervous system, your brain-body connection is pretty fatigued. That's one of the challenges of parenting kids with FASD. To help bring this to more ages and stages of development, as Joe mentioned, I have a new book coming called Your Amazing Brain that kind of ages up the illustrations. So what I was sharing with you before was from the Riley the Brave series. And now I want us to think for ourselves, which of these is getting louder. So here's our little amygdala, our gatekeeper alarm system. And we know that we might be having porcupine moments. We might be having those extra spiky moments where we are a little on edge and grumpy, where we're sort of prickly and pushing others away. And one of the special skills of porcupine brains is to team up with other porcupine brains to complain and blame. So again, I applaud you for coming tonight and being part of like reaching for that upstairs brain connection, because it's really easy to get stuck in the negative. Maybe your tiger brain is struggling. Maybe you want to roar. Maybe you want to, punish and consequence and rage. And maybe it's not even at your kids. Maybe your tiger brain is loud at your kiddo's birth mom. Maybe your tiger brain is loud at the system. Joe and I were talking a bit about how challenging it can be to find the support and understanding that you need as a parent of a child with FASD. Or maybe you've gotten really good at using your chameleon brain. Maybe you have a little bit of that trying to be perfect, or maybe you're quick to brush off the compliments of others about how about big and little things. So I'm conscious of time, so I could go off on a whole tangent here about that chameleon brain, but for the sake of making sure that we have some tangible things we can take with us this evening, I will control myself and share. Maybe that turtle brain is a little bit louder. Maybe you find yourself wanting to shut it all down. Maybe you feel sort of numb. That's one of the powers of our turtle protector, is to shut off feeling, to have less talking and moving and even thinking, right? That fog sort of takes over. So one of the ways that we can help our kids with big feelings is becoming more aware of our own big feelings, becoming more aware of our own downstairs brain moments. So I don't have an official poll, but again, I just ask you to write in the chat, which of these moments tends to be your biggest protector? What kind of moment do you tend to have the most? That tiger comes out. Yeah. Turtle, kind of just check out, want to shut it down. I know my turtle brain is loud when I find myself like laying on the floor, just sort of like just shutting down, basically. Chameleon, tiger, chameleon, right? So chameleon will come out for me when I'm, maybe I can just do more, be better, and that will make it all okay. And I need a little help from my upstairs brain or from someone else's upstairs brain to say, hey, you can't do it all. It's okay. We're in this together, right? Turtle, porcupine, and a bit of tiger. I love that you're checking in with yourself. This is part of what makes it possible to have compassion for ourselves, have compassion for our kids, and find our way through those big feelings, right? So our topic tonight was navigating big feelings. And we just spent a bunch of time talking about animals and the brain. So where does this leave us? Well, my hope with putting these really big behaviors in what might feel like a silly or playful sort of form with tigers and turtles and porcupines is that it makes it a little easier to do 3 things that can help us make it through these big feelings. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is be curious together. When things are going sideways, when your kid is off the rails, when you are really struggling, one of the first things I want you to check in with is which part of the brain is running the show. Is it protection mode? Remember, this is not a bad part of the brain. We need our quick responders. We need our act without thinking part of our brain to do stuff for us sometimes, but it's protection mode. It's protecting me, or sometimes it gets into relationships where maybe you find yourself wanting to protect your spouse against the kiddo who's having a tiger moment, right? Where we can get some of those divisions going up. Or is that connection mode in charge? Am I finding a little bit of upstairs brain energy to help me manage those big feelings coming from the downstairs brain? And I'm actually going to stop my screen share for just a second to share that there's an easy way to do this with your hands. So again, this might be familiar. This is something that Dr. Siegel talks about a lot. So Joe, if you would just do this with me on the screen, that would be great. Where if you hold up your hand, fold over your thumb, and make a fist, this is your brain. If you waggle your fingers, that is your big human cortex. That's that upstairs brain, right? If you open your fingers, your thumbnail is your amygdala. That's that traffic director alarm system that's saying either I am safe enough for my upstairs brain to run the show, or danger, 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 I need to send in all those downstairs brain protectors, this base of your palm, right? So if this is my brain, this base of your palm is your brain stem and that limbic system deep inside. So do I need to flip my lid and send in those downstairs brain protectors? So if you take nothing else away from tonight, I hope that you'll hold on to this idea of, is my upstairs brain running the show, or have I flipped my lid? For my kiddo, is their upstairs brain running the show, or have they flipped their lid? Because here's the reality in parenting. Our kids can't get stronger connections to their upstairs brain if they are constantly faced with a disconnected brain in the adult. I feel like I said that in a super complicated way. Basically, for your kids to develop their upstairs brain powers, they need to borrow your upstairs brain powers. There's a lot of co-regulation. There's a lot of us keeping our lid on or flipping our lid, taking a breath, getting regulated again, and coming back with our brain back intact and saying, hey, let's try this again, buddy. This is so hard. Yeah, I see that tiger brain is so loud, right? So if you take nothing else away from tonight, where are you in your brain, up or down? That has been such a game changer, even between me and my partner, to be able to talk about, hey, I need to tap out for a second. Or in a school situation, to be able to say, hey, it seems like, Johnny is flipping into that downstairs brain a lot during math. And I'm wondering what supports we can help with to make sure that upstairs brain can connect so that he can take part in his math class. So that first step is to be curious. That first step is to really think about where we are in our brain. Okay, I'm going to share a couple more things and then we'll take time for questions. So if you have questions now, feel free to pop them in the chat. If you want to wait and do it in a minute, that's fine too. So we're going to be curious. We're going to be proactive together. This is, again, why I just think it's so valuable to help kids understand their brains in a really affirming and trauma-informed way. There are so many ways to be proactive together. So I'm going to share a few ideas. This is not a to-do list. This is not for you to go and do all of these things. It's just to let maybe there's one that you want to hold on to, or there's one that maybe affirms something you're already doing. So first up, maybe you've heard the phrase Q-tip, quit taking it personally. Just that reminder that your kids' behavior, your kids' downstairs brain behavior, it's not about you. It's how their brain is wired, and you continuing to muster that upstairs brain strength, continuing to show up with compassion and help them learn to manage those downstairs brain protectors. That is so powerful. Behavior feels really personal. And especially when you're the safe person for your child, you're going to see the worst of it. And so it's just it's not like, I almost don't like it because it's like, quit taking it personally, as though, you know, you're bad for taking it personally. I don't mean it like that at all. It's just a handy acronym. Tape some Q-tips around your house, around your apartment, to remind yourself that in these fiery moments when my kid is tigering at me, it's not about me. It's not personal. It's not because I'm a failure as a parent. It's not because, you know, I'm doing it wrong. It's a brain thing. And so I'm going to take a breath and get my upstairs brain in charge. Okay, we're going to rapid fire these a little bit. So, and in the moment rescue strategy number 2, check in with your eyebrows. It sounds ridiculous, but one of the fastest ways to send danger signals to someone else is to have your eyebrows like this, right? To have those eyebrows that are shooting up, or eyebrows that are furrowed. So in the moment, one of the rescue strategies that you have is to just relax your face for just a second. In the schools, I do a lot of work in schools, and we talk about like, fix your face. Like you got to just check in with your face, because that's the quickest way to send either threat or safety signals to that amygdala. Okay, I know this is a lot all at once. Remember, this is not a to-do list, just ideas to feed what you're already doing. Number 3 is to get moving. So often when a brain is stuck in defense mode, a little bit of playful movement can really help unstick. So maybe it's, and you don't have to call it out as like, you're being a porcupine, go do some exercise. But hey, let's go for a walk. Oh my goodness, that porcupine brain's loud. Let's go, let's jump around a little bit. Gosh, I'm gonna go outside. You wanna come outside with me? It's that kind of getting moving. Some of you may think this is absolutely ridiculous, and some of you may be totally on board, but one of my favorite in the moment rescue plans is to sing what I want to say instead of yelling what I want to yell. So it might sound like, I've already answered that question and the answer hasn't changed. And maybe you're spinning them around a little bit to get a little movement in. It helps you activate your upstairs brain. And we know our kids with FASD get stuck and have a hard time adjusting to things they don't want to hear, just like we all do, but even more so. And so singing is a playful way to wake up that upstairs brain. All right, number 5, offer a redo. So often we know all brains need repetition, but especially brains impacted by fetal alcohol need lots and lots and lots and lots of chances to get it right, and lots of practice getting it right, even when they do it wrong. So, oh, can we try again? Hey, did you mean, oh gosh, I think you were trying to say, that sounded like a tiger. Can we try that with a kind voice? Right? Those kinds of just prompts to redo. That can be so helpful for building that upstairs brain. And last but not least, in our proactive rescue strategies is start fresh. I know Jeff Noble talks about this a lot. Just certainly every day is a new day, but even after a big blow up, it doesn't, like, if you need some repair, if you need some time to say, hey, I'm really hurting after that yelling episode, or after you hurt your sister, I'm still feeling that a little bit. If you need to move through that makes sense. That's normal. That's okay. And we want to give our kids a fresh start so that they're not dragging around all the downstairs brain moments they've ever had, or all the downstairs brain moments they've had this week. Because we know it's going to be a challenge for them. We know it's a lot to build that staircase of the brain. So I want to make sure we have time for questions. So I'm just going to share real quick some places that we can connect. I would love to keep the conversation going on social media at Jessica Sinarski, on Facebook and Instagram. I have a couple videos up on YouTube to just continue to help build these concepts out that will be growing. And then, as Joe mentioned, jessicasinarski.com, there's a blog, there's some free resources, there's lots of stuff to help you put this in practice. And you can also find books there, as well as certainly in from your local booksellers. So that is where we can connect. And with that, I will stop my screen share and answer any questions.
Oh, thank you, Jessica. That was amazing. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat, which has been really busy, actually. I have to say, Q-tip, I just think is great. I do. We the FASD Hub have recently launched our A to Z resources, which are like fact sheets and videos.
Okay.
From anything from, I don't know, affect regulation,
Sure.
Cognitive, everything. We've tried to go through the whole A to Z, and we're adding to it. You know, it's just a work in process. But Q-tip, I think, is great. Quick taking it personally. I think that's just an absolutely amazing thing. Just as a like positive for parents and caregivers to read something that is probably what we all deal with when you feel like very much attacked by your child on a day. So
yes,
it's really nice to hear that. So yeah, so Donna's just said she's got 2 of the Riley books and her kids love them, as does my daughter. And my daughter's 13, so I bought them, and she was like a little bit older than like the suggested age, but I was still able to use them really effectively with her. There's a lot of people talking about singing in their house, a lot of people talking about their eyebrows.
Yes.
And I think for me, particularly, what I think is really useful is for parents to be able to take the characters that you have and use those with their children, you know, to enable their children to be able to understand their brains. I think that's what, for me, was the biggest thing that I found interesting when I first sort of came across your work, was that you made it something that was accessible for a parent to explain to their child, how their child could verbalize what was going on in their head. Because because children, you know, they can't really explain when they've got FASD what is going on. They take on that probably profanity, swearing,
yes,
not appropriate language, and
right.
so if you can replace that with characters, I think that is, you know, a massive plus for people. I guess one of my questions, whilst I'm looking at, I'm trying to keep my eye on the chat. I
have it up too. So
yeah, so I guess one of my questions is how you came to be in the realms of FASD with your work.
I'm trying to think of the first, like my first exposure to it, because I don't recall learning about it in school. So I feel like it had to be in practice. And so my first job right out of graduate school was with a child welfare agency in the Bronx and in New York City. And there was, I know there were a couple of kids that I was working with that had experienced FASD, and there's just not a lot known. There's a lot of misdiagnosis. There's still so much stigma. And so, yeah, so that was part of, it was another thing that I felt like, as a professional who's supposed to know the answers to things, I didn't know the answers. And so that became another part of my journey to just dig, learn, grow, figure out what the heck is going on and how we can support.
So we just have a question set from someone who says her son, aged 13, gets very angry when I try to talk to him about emotions.
Yes.
And how can I help?
Yes, love that question. And that is another reason that I write the way that I do in the Riley series, because this is super common. So you are not alone. There are many, many kids who struggle to talk about feelings, especially in the world of trauma, but even with other, certainly FASD and other kinds of neurodivergence. So this is one of the benefits of the animal language. So I was working with a kiddo who has FASD, and he had just had a big tiger moment with dad. He had just had this rage episode, had like ripped his dad's shirt, the kicking, screaming, head banging, all the whole 9 yards. We were working to contain. I was, doing a lot of the things that I shared with you as far as like helping him move and trying to break that cycle and discharge the energy and that kind of thing. And we were talking about it afterwards, sort of in the parking lot of my office and splashing around in puddles and some stuff to just kind of move through the big feelings. And I said something like, gosh, I wonder if you can think about like, what happened right before you got so mad at dad? Or so angry at dad. And he said, I was not mad. I was not angry. Like that feeling word was too much for him. And I was like, oh, okay. So before you had that big tiger moment, like, were you feeling tigery? Yes. And the tiger he could grab onto, but he couldn't make it all the way to the word mad. So there's a couple things I pull from that. One is talking about emotions is almost always going to be an on-the-go thing. Very rarely for our kids are they going to be able to sit down and have a conversation with eye contact about feelings. It's going to be while you're, out for a walk, or playing a game, or driving in the car, or it's going to be doing something else, because that helps send safety signals to their downstairs brain to say, okay, we can approach this tough topic and bring a little bit of upstairs brain energy to it. Another thing that if the feelings words themselves are too much, start with the brain. So start by talking about, we all have downstairs brain moments. It's normal. Mommy has them, you have them. I guess he's 13. Maybe you don't say mommy anymore. But talking about that, just normalizing that it's either our upstairs or downstairs, and our downstairs brain needs help from the upstairs brain. And so that's part of why we try to put words to things. That's, maybe it's starting by even just using the flipping the lid hand motions, like, oh, I am about to flip my lid, so I'm going to cool out, right? Modeling some of that can be ways that you show that it's not that you're not a bad person if you are feeling things, and that we all have to practice navigating these big emotions.
Somebody just private messaged me and said, how do you help your child when they experience really big emotions, but when you try and talk to them, they talk over you?
So this can get complicated. So let me pull a couple pieces here. And I know we're right at the hour, but I'll do my best to do this justice. So if you think about when you're having a tiger moment, like when you're steaming mad about something, that's not the time you want to talk about it. So if we're talking about later, if we're saying they've gone through their big emotions and now they're regulated again, and we're trying to have a conversation about it. So assuming that's the case, then so there's a couple things here. So one is FASD often makes it really hard to think for some of these complex thinking and holding empathy kinds of brain functions. And so sometimes what we're asking them to do in processing this, incident is more than their brain is capable of. And so it may be that right? It may be more than what their brain can do at the moment. And so it might be that we're really starting down in the like safety category of like, gosh, hey, your tiger gets super loud. You're still learning to sort of wrangle that tiger. How can we what's our upstairs brain action plan? How can we stay safe even when that tiger gets really loud? So that's part of what you'll find in the activity book is, in fact, in Your Amazing Brain and in the Riley activity book is some walking through how to make that kind of plan. That said, what you'll see in the activity book in particular is a lot of little try this sections that say, it's probably not putting this worksheet in front of your kid and asking them to fill it out. It's things like playing with Play-Doh while you talk about it. It's going for a jog. It's doing it while you're cooking dinner. And that's exhausting for my brain. Like, I want to just sit with the paper and do the thing on the paper. Like, that's what makes sense to me. But for our kiddos, often there has to be some other element that's settling their brain or providing something safe or enjoyable so that they can approach this topic that is so difficult for them to approach.
Absolutely. Well, I could stay all night because we're still getting questions coming in, but I really appreciate that we are now done with our hour. So Jessica, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been fabulous. I'm so pleased that I found you on my journey. I'm sure it's been a really great insight for the people that have joined us this evening. We've shared lots of information, we've shared your links, and we will continue to do so. Thank you so much for tonight. It's been brilliant. Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for spending some time with me.
No worries at all. Good night.